Yes, the recording is set. Please start it.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second day of our three-day charrette for our noon talk today on elements of a successful downtown. Ron Garcia, city planner for the city of Baldwin Park. Thank you, staff, council, planning commissioners that are joining us today for this presentation. I'll hand it off to our downtown consultant, Kaiser Wangwala.
Thank you, Ron. This is Kaiser Rangwala, principal with Rangwala Associates, helping the city. Our team is helping the city with the downtown specific plan. I want to introduce Vinayak, and let me set up the context by suggesting that we're all trying very hard to create more housing units, more density, to address the housing crisis that we find ourselves in, the health crisis, which is create walkable communities, and the climate crisis, which is create mixed-use areas that are walkable so that you don't have to drive every place and emit CO2 into the atmosphere. And then fiscal crisis to make sure that we are attracting investment in our downtown area and in our city. Now, it's very critical as we're trying to increase the density and increase investment, how we execute the density. Is the term density, in a very crude term, really means more of something. And if that something is good, we're all for it. But if that something is something you despise, then you're vehemently against it, and you show up, and that's how you get a lot of NIMBYism saying, if that is progress, I'm against it. Vinayak Bharne is a principal with Mullen Polaroid. He's the key design force, and Vinayak and his teams are masters of understanding how to provide density, how to provide increased density in a very responsive manner, responsive to the context, so that it creates lasting value for the community. A proposal that is befitting for one parcel may be completely different to the site across the street because it has different context. And in my opinion, nobody understands this better than Mullen Polaroid. They have constructed and built a number of very attractive, very handsome buildings in Southern California, all within easy driving distance. And I think some of the projects he's going to cover, and I would strongly encourage you to go visit these projects. So with that, I'll hand it over to Vinayak.
Thank you, Kaiser. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you. So I will be talking briefly about the ingredients of a walkable downtown. And to summarize, there are fundamentally two of them. In the broadest sense, there is the public realm and all the ingredients of the public realm, including open space, public space, streets, privatized public space, etc. And then there is the private development side of it. And one without the other is like a butterfly without wings. I mean, they're completely synergistic. And what has happened over the last 40, 50 years in urbanization is we have forgotten this interrelationship. And as a result, buildings are conceived by architects just as objects that don't make cogent ensembles and don't frame public realms. And landscape architects work on doing public realms in isolation without understanding what the relationship of buildings is. So the disconnect is what creates places of a completely different kind. I want to begin by reminding all of us that the choice of making a downtown is really the greatest privilege we have in this country, because these are two emblematic slides that show two different kinds of downtowns. The first one on top is a historic image. Instead of showing you.
Vinayak, can you go full screen so we can see more of the slide? Press Control L.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry about that. So, the choice of the downtown is really a privilege we all have, because the slide to the top reminds us that the great urbanist legacy that we've inherited is really one where there was just a simple logic of prioritizing 2 feet over 4 wheels. Not that 4 wheels were absent, but the 2 feet were just given more priority. You can see this is a slide of old Pasadena in the 1920s, where there was a streetcar in the middle, People are crossing the street very, very comfortably. The street has parking on the side. The buildings are lining the street all across the United States. There was a great tradition of these downtowns. And systematically, legally, through policy, they were dismantled and replaced by the slide you see below, which is an exaggerated version, of course, but nonetheless a provocative one that reminds you how we transformed this paradigm to focus on cars, to focus on toxic landscapes that interiorized people into gigantic buildings, that inundated the landscape with hardscape for parking. They were unsustainable because water couldn't percolate into the aquifer anymore, and created all kinds of unforeseen consequences whose effects we now know 60 years down the line. So there's no reason to belabor this point, but I think the essential point I'm trying to make is the choice of the character, quality, and performance of a downtown is a choice we truly have. And the greatest thing about the way planning works in this part of the world is because the kind of landscapes you see in the slide below were done through legal means, through policy, the reversal of those very policies can yield you the slide to the top. This is not a privilege every country in the world has because things are murkier in other countries. But in this country, writing the rules, writing the proper framework can actually transform landscapes like this. And the best news of all is this is no longer a new science. Hundreds of downtowns across the United States have been transformed from what you see in the bottom to what you see on the top. This is a well-worn science. There are economic results that can be shown to you about the importance of the slide to the top versus the slide below. So what I'm going to do is take you through 5 or 6 projects, first related to the public realm. And I also must acknowledge the presence of our landscape architect, Dave Schneider, who has played a crucial role in all these projects. And as you ask questions about open space, I've requested him to chime in as well. This is a project we did together a few years ago in the downtown of Lancaster, which, as you know, is a desert city, a very small desert city near Palmdale. This used to be their historic downtown in the 20s, a very charming main street, not unlike downtowns all across the US where people would walk, they would live, they would find all their groceries and daily expenses within walking distance of their homes. And as zoning changed and as urbanization changed and the car began to take over, this very street began to look like this, which looks like a COVID-19 street. I mean, it's completely empty. It was like there was absolutely nobody. It was a disinvested downtown when we came to this project in 2009. You can see there are cars parked on the street. There was a grid, there are some existing trees, but it was largely disinvested. The city had initiated a specific plan, not unlike what you guys are doing here, what we all are doing here. And one of the catalytic projects that was identified in the specific plan was a redo of the main street, not unlike what we're proposing for Ramona or another street in your place. This was 100-foot right-of-way, which means that the distance from the building to the building is 100 feet. It had 10-foot sidewalks, parking on both sides, and 5 large lanes of traffic in the middle of it, which clearly from our traffic studies proved that there was way too much asphalt here for the kind of traffic volumes it would carry. The second thing about Lancaster was the downtown actually had a grid, like you have, an interconnected network of streets such as the one we're trying to propose, which means that when you have an interconnected network that accords traffic to flow from one part of the downtown to the other, it is possible that certain portions of streets in your downtown may slow down traffic a little bit before they carry on. So it's not necessary for traffic speeds to be continuous as they go through your downtown. You're trying to make cars behave in certain parts of the city so that pedestrians can get greater priority. So what we did here, the long story short, is we did not break the curbs. This is a very important point to note, because breaking curbs raises the cost of a project. The infrastructure that is below your sidewalk is retained, that is not touched. The parking on the side is retained. This side parking on the street is extremely important from a number of standpoints. Most importantly, it renders a pedestrian-friendly environment where people walking on the sidewalk now psychologically feel a kind of a buffer from the moving vehicles. We took the central 2 lanes of traffic, central 3 lanes actually, and paved it with pervious paving. We kept a 12-foot travel lane next to it on both sides, but instead of making the central zone purely a pedestrian zone, we actually striped it for parking, which could be parked on a normal day this way. We planted trees because it's an arid environment. You already have this condition in your median and the sidewalks. But the beauty of this, the main point I'm making is streets are not permanent entities. The most beautiful way of designing public realms is to make them flexible entities. So while this is a normal day where the middle portion is used for parking, you can just as easily close it on a Thursday or a weekend and make it a fantastic farmer's market. This doesn't have to happen along the mile-long entire length. You could take 2 or 3 blocks and close it because there are other streets on that day to take the cars around. The beautiful thing about this project is within 8 months since Dave Schneider, our landscape architect, finished the construction documents, the city constructed this. It took about, it's an 8-block long street, took about 1 block per month. We can talk about the budget, etc. if you have any questions. You can see the double row of trees, young trees here. And the beautiful thing about this project is by the time it was finished, in 3 years, this had become such an important destination in the city that it attracted $300 million of economic investment in the form of development. So what looked like a sort of a disinvested downtown in the slide to the top left now became a very vibrant downtown. The city celebrated its first Christmas parade in the heart of this project by shutting down the street. This is Christmas 2010, and this is the farmer's market that happens every Thursday. So the point of showing you this project is that taking over your public realm and recasting your public realm through mobility improvements, balancing pedestrians and vehicles, bringing in new development that is responsible to the public realm. Note how these buildings make street faces that are continuous, creates a destination that is like an extended park. This is what I was saying yesterday evening. This is the idea of streets as extended parks. This is not a place for vehicles alone. This is a place for people to hang out. And the result is economic prosperity. People want to live in places like this. They attract good development. You write the right rules, you bring in the right development, you shepherd the making of 1 or 2 places in your city, and the entire prosperity index in terms of the sociability and the daily life of your city entirely has potential to change. We are doing similar projects with our landscape architect in other parts, not very far from you. This is Montclair, California, where we just finished a general plan update and a specific plan for their downtown with Kaiser. And a couple of the projects, catalytic projects, very similar to yours are, the transformation of streets. So this is Arrow Highway, a major east-west connector. You can see it's a very wide asphalted street with practically nothing around it but large swaths of parking. The buildings are set back significantly. And what we are proposing is a massive transformation to convert these streets into parkscapes. Just the idea of putting in bulb outs, which you can see right here, which is a strategy we are pursuing along Ramona right now, where there are intermittent bulb outs that are parked between the cars. And the advantage of that is as drivers go here, the visuality of the street, as you see it from a driver's point of view, is reduced. And not only that, you get an additional tree, which makes a beautiful shaded environment along the sidewalk, but also creates another beautiful shaded room here. So just landscape alone has the potential of transforming your streets in a way that is unimaginably beautiful and environmentally sustainable. This is a Fremont Avenue, a perpendicular street in the downtown of Montclair, which is currently, again, very empty. You can see there's practically nothing going on there of significant consequence. And you can make, just through the basis of landscape, trees and tree character, the palette of trees, the choice of trees, can change the look of the street. So the main point here is to note, and our landscape architect will talk about this today and tomorrow, the choice of trees is an architectural question in itself. Just like we have the character of buildings, we have the character of a street. So choosing palms versus foliage trees, choosing vertical trees versus horizontal trees, choosing trees that are perennially blooming versus seasonal, all of these can create aesthetic delights and environmental indexes that are unimaginably beautiful, but simple and logical to implement. Which now brings me to the second part, which is the issue of private development. And this is a slide that reminds us of the syndrome of sprawl that has plagued our cities and downtowns all across the country. The most dangerous thing about it is this is done through concerted policy. I mean, policy is written in such a way that it tells you what to do, but it doesn't tell you what not to do. So architects, urbanists are allowed to set back buildings from the street 10, 20, 30 feet because there's nothing in the codes that tell them that you cannot have a blank wall. The code is silent about the negatives that such buildings can bring in. and too much is left to the whim of the architects and designers that take undue advantage of it. And the result is landscapes that are unimaginable, placeless, and really don't do anything from either a social standpoint or an economic standpoint. And here are close-ups of this. I mean, here is a building, doesn't matter where it is, but you can see, I mean, this is a building done to a code, but it's incredibly shocking that a code would allow a building like this, which is totally windowless to the public realm. And this is legally done. This is not an illegal project. This is a project that is following the code. But because the code doesn't mandate any kind of frontage condition, you can get a building as ridiculous as this. And imagine now an entire street where no building has a window on the wall, and imagine what would happen to your neighborhood. So this is a syndrome that's lying in front of us, a very important lesson for us to take on. The second idea is the question of frontage from another point of view. Here is a building, a stacked flat apartment building, 4 stories, that shows us how much attention has been paid to the ground floor. And I can tell you the attention is zero, because what's happening here is the garage of the apartment building is exposed to the street completely. So as you walk along the street, there is nothing positive about this building. If this building was multiplied 10 times along the street, you would get a dead facade on the ground floor. Leave alone the fact that the architecture of the building may be characterless, but even if you leave that alone, the idea that a ground floor is not activated doesn't lend anything to the street. So this is a very important point to note, because what usually is done in mainstream projects is you have a parking podium, which is blank, and you usually plant something in front of it and justify it as something beautiful. But this is not a good idea. Simply putting flowers and shrubs and trees in front of a blank facade is not the way to go, because it doesn't foster a pedestrian-friendly environment. What we encourage in codes is for the parking to be set back, and simply a liner of 10, 20, or 30 feet that begins to make a cogent shop front or an apartment or something that is inviting on the street to make a facade on the ground floor to activate a positive sidewalk condition. The third syndrome is the construction quality and the FAR massing. I mean, here's a classic example where the house to the left was probably designed in the 1900s. This could be anywhere, including your city, right? I mean, this is an enduring building. It's going to be there for the next 100 years. It's designed beautiful materials. It has aesthetic value. And right next to it is an FAR building, because your zoning code did not talk about frontage, massing, compatibility, response to your neighbors. The code said nothing about this. What the code said is you are allowed to go 4 stories tall. This X is your FAR, X amount of parking, X amount of setback. And the result is a box next to my charming house that has now devalued the house and the entire neighborhood in 1 second. This is happening all over because of the kind of policies that we have written. And this is mainstream development, which is also equally dangerous, because what this is essentially is taking a plan with a double loaded corridor or a single loaded corridor, putting units around it on both sides, extruding the diagram to 4 stories, and cladding it with some kind of architecture. I mean, it may look good to you, but what I'm trying to say here is these are essentially boxy buildings that don't do anything much for the street. Note how the street is dead on the ground floors. Note how here, for example, you have pretty much a dead street. Note how every single thing is stacked relentlessly, right? So these are the kind of buildings that make 90% of our cities. This is the middle of the real estate bell curve. These are mainstream stacked flat buildings that make 90% of our fabric. They're not as bad as the worst buildings I showed you, but they're not as great as what we need to do by just shifting a few things in the code and monitoring the character and quality of these buildings to really make them slightly perform a little better towards our public realm. So what are the choices we then have as antidotes to everything that I showed you that we consider to be sort of, to use a very provocative word, toxic typologies? I mean, these typologies, these kind of buildings are types that have really destroyed the place quality of our cities. So what are some of the alternatives? Well, the alternative answers are right in front of us. We've just forgotten about them. Here is a diagram to the top that reminds you that in any part of the world, particularly in the US, any city, any downtown is essentially a gradient of densities. The downtown is not homogeneous. So, there is a part of the downtown, as Kaiser will write in his code, which is going to be the densest portion of the downtown. Here, the buildings might be 5 stories tall. 6 stories tall, 4 stories tall. Then as you go down towards the single family neighborhoods, they will come down and become 3 stories, 2 stories, and finally 2 stories with 1-story porches to cater to the single family fabric. The moment you have a code that begins to talk about transitional density, you are now beginning to create a compatible transect, as we call it, that goes from the highest part of the city downtown to the lowest part of the downtown. When you don't have a transect, you land up with this, which is a 4-story building next to a single family house with no compatibility, nothing, no respect for historic character, absolutely no concern. This is a catch-as-catch-can zoning code that allows anything to go anywhere. So what we have realized is in our office particularly, we have been studying the traditional American city, particularly in Southern California, and we've discovered these incredible gems of building types that were right in front of us that developers are now beginning to understand the value of. And what I'm going to show you is the kind of revival of these types for contemporary realities. So the wisdom of these types in terms of their open spaces, in terms of their frontages, their character, is respected on the one hand, but they are also adapted to cater to things they did not have in the 1920s. A great example is parking. You know, parking demands in the 1920s were very different from what they are today. So how do you take the enduring qualities of these typologies, the enduring material qualities, architectural qualities, formal qualities, frontage qualities, and amalgamate them with construction realities, code realities, and parking realities? And the projects I'm going to show you are some of the projects we've done in our office over the last 20 years with developers. And this is a tribute to some of these traditional types that we have forgotten. So we begin with single family houses, such as these beautiful cottages. These exist in your city in the neighborhoods. You have something called mews, which are tiny alleys. For example, you know, there are a lot of alleys that we find in cities that are often considered back spaces, where garbage bins are, but you don't have to look at it only as that. You can actually have garages with units on top of them that actually look into the alley, that actually bring security onto the alley, animate the alley, and become places in themselves. This is an exceptional example because it's a quadruplex. It's 4 units on a single family lot. But if I propose this building next to a single family house in a neighborhood, the neighbor would not shout. The density of a single family house in a neighborhood is 4 dwelling units to the acre. This project is 16 dwelling units to the acre. That's 4 times the density of a single family house. But you would not say a thing because it looks like a single family house when I look at it from the street. You could never tell that this is 4 times the density. The secret is something our codes lack, which is the idea of frontage that Kaiser will talk about tomorrow, where simply coding the predictability and the criteria of the interface between the public and the private realm renders a face to the building that makes compatible character, which is a simple logical thing that we can do and we are going to do as part of this specific plan. We then have townhouses, which are denser than single family houses. Townhouses can go up to 15 to 20 dwelling units to the acre. Townhouses are essentially narrow units that are 20 or 25 feet wide. They're long units, so they're about 50 feet deep, 40 feet deep. They have a yard at the back, and they only get light from the narrow sides. Each townhouse is entered directly from the street, as you see here, and the garage from the alley or from the back is where you get your parking access. You can go even denser and go up to 30 and 40 dwelling units to the acre in a traditional typology that we call the courtyard. When the Spanish came to Southern California, they brought a type with them which took the traditional East Coast townhouse and organized it around courts, open to sky courts because of the benign climate. So you have townhouse units that are arranged around courtyards. I will show you some of the projects of what that can accomplish. And finally, you have stacked flats where units are stacked one above the other along corridors. But note how beautiful this building can be because the windows and the rhythm and the variety of the composition is not uniform, but diversified to create ensembles of buildings and make it look like a fabric that is diverse and rich. So what we have done in our office as we've studied this is we've realized that even if you take a building such as a courtyard type where there's a simple courtyard in the middle and open to skies communal space, that courtyard typology can become dense as it goes from the edge of the downtown to the middle of the downtown. And how do you densify it without losing the quality of the open space, the private open space and the building? And that's what we're going to talk about next. Another important thing to note is that eventually, while we spend all our communal time and our much of our lives in streets and squares, we also buy units from the inside out. So we cannot deny the reality that designing the individual units is also equally important. And this is a reminder that unit diversity is equally important in a market. For example, an elderly couple or a young bachelor or a young graduate may want to live in a small flat or a loft because that's what they can afford. That's the kind of space they want. On the other hand, people with families who want to have an urban living may want to have a two-story unit where the bedrooms are on top, the living rooms are below. So providing diversity in unit types, not just building types, is equally important. One of the important points I'm trying to make here is mainstream construction, or typically business as usual, relentlessly stacks one unit type in a building and packs the heck out of it. And one of the things we are trying to do very astutely is encourage on a strategic level the insertion of new unit types such as lofts, such as townhouses and so on and so forth, both on a horizontal basis and a stacked basis, as you see here, to bring in a diversity of choices for many demographics that can live in your town. So here are some projects to demonstrate that these are real projects. This is not theory. We have built these projects over the last 20, 30 years. We have worked with developers to make this happen. We have worked with cities to enable them. And we have written codes that come out of these projects. So the codes that Kaiser and we write for these projects do not come through a theoretical discussion. They come from a very deep experience of having done these projects in terms of their practicalities. So here is a courtyard in Pasadena. I thought we would look at this today because there are portions of your downtown that are directly straddling single family neighborhoods. For example, if you look at Downing to the south of the tracks, right now the blocks to the south of the tracks are all single family neighborhoods. So you cannot pour a 5-story, 4-story building smack next to a single family house. That's not the way to do it. You can put a 4- and 5-story building facing the tracks, but as it transitions into the single family neighborhoods, the densities of the housing needs to go down. So this is a project that reminds you that along the edges of your downtown, it is possible to take lots next to the adjacent single family neighborhoods and densify them, but densify them so that they're 4 or 5 times the density of the single family neighborhood. That becomes a bridge between the denser housing that is going to come on one side and the less dense housing on the other side. This is a bungalow court, a beautiful tradition in Southern California, where individual detached or attached homes were arranged around a simple garden. So these are 2 single family lots. Imagine that that's one single family lot, that's another single family lot. A developer comes and assembles these 2 single family lots, but rather than designing only 2 houses on it, what he or she does is takes 4 houses with detached garages and then a duplex, and each one gets a common garden. Now, the beautiful thing about this project particularly is that all of these houses that you see here were salvages from old bungalows that was being discarded in Pasadena. And I want to remind you of this, that this is also a beautiful way. There are many beautiful single family homes in your city that are worthy of attention. Rather than disposing them, you can arrange through developers who are interested in this, through incentives and other things, create a preservation strategy where you can move these houses. Many of them are just simple timber construction. You can move them, bring them to another site, assemble them. This is being done in other cities by developers through tax credits, etc. And it becomes a very important way of both encouraging heritage conservation, but also creating typologies that are born out of the multiplication of a single family bungalow. And you can see here that this project right here, which is 6 times the density of a single family house, sits right next to a single family house. But there's never an issue of compatibility because it looks literally like a series of single family houses from the street. So it doesn't intrude into the essential character and quality of the neighborhood. As densities rise, 22 dwelling units to the acre, we get into what we call tuck under parking. Tuck under parking is a form of parking where you park under the unit in the small garage, you go into a small lobby, and then you climb the flight of steps and go to your living room above. So it's like a townhouse with its own independent garage below. And this works particularly on narrow lots for multifamily housing. So this is an excellent project to show where, particularly to the north of Morgan Park, where we have a series of multifamily lots right now. As those lots get assembled, for example, you could do buildings that are 2 and 3 stories tall, 2.5 stories tall, but you can do them in forms that are surface parked and that are compatible with the character and quality of single family homes that are behind them or around them. The way this project works is it's a corner site. So you do not want to see any cars here. You do not want to see any cars here. So all of the garages are kept away from the streets. So you come in through a lane this way and all the garages are parked here. But these units, because they are facing a street on one side and a courtyard on the other side, their garages are not attached. Their garages are separated. Because if you had put the garages here, you would see garages along the street. If you put their garages here, you would see them along the courtyard. So the most important thing in projects like this, from a coding standpoint, is to clarify which are the fronts and which are the backs. That is a front, 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 this is a front. This is a back, and that is a back. A front should always face a front. A back should always face a back. The biggest problem with sprawl development is that fronts are made to face backs. If I come out of my porch, I see your garage, which is a big mistake. It should never be allowed. So these are a number of townhouse units that face a courtyard. The second lesson this project offers is the image of the project. Rather than treating this project like a single building that is massive and long, you can break the image of the project as an aggregate of individual houses. Because it's next to a single family neighborhood, you can use the concept of single family houses brought together. And the moment you do that, even though it is an attached project, it begins to change the image and the character and quality of a project. So you can see a project like this in a single family neighborhood. It is 22 dwelling units. It's 5 times the density of a single family house. But it still is compatible within a single family neighborhood because of the frontages and the idea that these are a series of individual houses brought together into a project. At 25 dwelling units to the acre, the surface parking is very difficult to achieve once we cross the threshold of 25 to 30. This is where podium parking, underground parking, semi-underground parking, all these abilities come into play. Here is a simple 1-court project in Pasadena. Again, a corner site with a simple courtyard right next to a single family house. This is a single family house right here. This is a major street in Pasadena, 2 major streets. Parking is underground because the site has a slope. We can take advantage of the slope and put the parking underground. So it disappears from the street. And then what you do is you basically take 10 units, which is what the program was here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you arrange them around a common courtyard. Note that the units that are away from the street have their private patios at the back here. Note that the units that are facing the street have their private patios inside. So this is a unique unit, which is an L-shaped unit with an office space, making this a work-live unit. So you can sleep here, you can dine here, you can live here, you come out, you work during your office, in the morning right there, and you have a common courtyard in the middle. These people is more like a townhouse. The living room is here, the bedrooms are here, dining rooms are here, and you have a private patio at the back. And what you share is a beautiful common courtyard that is visible from the street. And this is a simple house, a simple building that transitions from the single family neighborhood onto a major street. So the reason it is not rendered as a series of single family houses, as I showed you in the last project, is because this is a transitional site. It faces on the one side a major street in Pasadena and a single family house on the other. So the scale of the single family house is respected, but the look of the building changes as it comes to the street because it actually addresses a different urban condition. This is the courtyard inside. And you can see the simple joy of living around communal rooms. You can bring a chair out, you can do barbecues here, you can have social life with your neighbors, all arranged around a communal open space with private patios for each house. We then come to 35 dwelling units to the acre, where underground parking and podium parking becomes absolutely essential. This is a project in West Hollywood, in the historic district of West Hollywood, where the same concept of arranging units around courtyards is now made more intricate. So the site has a slope, parking is semi-subterranean. You enter through a flight of steps here, and you walk into the first courtyard around which there are units, and you walk into the second courtyard. Now, the important thing to note in this project is this project had the choice of being a corridor-driven project. These are 20 units of housing. They could have been done as a corridor building. But we chose not to do it as a corridor building. For example, this project could have been a double-loaded bar like this, and a double-loaded bar like that, and a double-loaded bar like that. And we could have resulted in 20 units. What we decided to do is eliminate corridors, because corridors have one big disadvantage, whether it's single-loaded corridor or double-loaded corridor. A double-loaded corridor has the disadvantage of not cross-ventilating your units. When you have two units that are facing either sides of a corridor, you enter through the corridor, but your light and air comes from only one side of the unit. A single-loaded corridor allows cross-ventilation, but you have people walking by your living room constantly, so there's very little privacy. So the point we are trying to make is where it is possible, when you reach higher densities, you absolutely need single and double-loaded corridors. But at lower densities, 25, 30 dwelling units to the acre, 3-story buildings, it's entirely possible not to have corridors as the only way of thinking about how we want to live. So what this project does is takes 20 units and arranges them around courtyards and then stacks them with staircases that lead you to the upper floors. So people who want to live on the ground floors buy a unit on the ground floor, you climb a flight of steps and you go to the second floor. So it's a 2-story building with some portions that are 3, an arrangement of flats with townhouses on top of them that give you a 0 corridor building where everything you see in this building from gross to net is saleable area. So it's a huge incentive for a developer to do this project, because in a typical corridor project, about 18% of your gross to net area cannot be sold. So this is an incentive for talking about these kind of projects and educating developers in your city about the possibility of doing this kind of thing. And again, they're arranged around courtyards. And the result is now, instead of getting the relentless apartment buildings, such as the photographs that I showed you, you all of a sudden get a series of houses that are brought together in a common language. In this case, it was a Mediterranean style project because the developer wanted it to be this way, inspired by the historic district that surrounds them, which is largely Mediterranean. But this is an absolutely contemporary building with parking below. Note how the facade is broken into smaller increments. It's not a relentless cookie cutter building. You have a taller mass here, you have a bridge mass here, a smaller mass here. Note that that's a unit, a townhouse unit, that's a flat over a flat, that's another flat over a flat, and that's a townhouse over the garage. So the assembly of complex units, townhouse, flats, and the elimination of corridors, and the rhythmic play of openings, if shepherded during a design process, can yield simple results that can be enduring and wonderful. You walk through the entrance Zaguan, you go through a passage. This is the garage courtyard. And these are the communal courtyards where people gather. So here is a classic example of the courtyard as an outdoor living room that is shared by everyone. There's a fireplace where the people hang out. This is the entrance to the unit at the bottom level, and a staircase that leads you to the unit on the upper level. So you eliminated every single corridor. Everything you see here is a balcony for that unit. Simple 2-story building at densities of 35 DUs per acre. We now come to the same science where you can go up to 50 dwelling units to the acre, which is really the beginnings of middle density. So this is what we call, sort of mid-density apartment living. 50 dwelling units to the acre, 3.5, 4 stories, standard stick construction. Typical type 5 construction can take you up to 70 dwelling units to the acre. So this is not going up 4 stories relentlessly. This is a transitional density at about 50 dwelling units to the acre. The average height of a building like this is actually 3.5, not 4. So some portions of it are 4, some portions of it are 2.5 and 3. Very similar project to the one I showed you along a principal avenue in Pasadena, this time arranged around 2 courtyards. So it's a simple apartment arrangement of single loaded wings. You can see it right here. Everything is single loaded. There is no corridor except right here. So you enter through a beautiful passage, what we call a zaguan or a paseo, right there and right there. You enter into a large courtyard, a small courtyard, and all the units are simply arranged around there. And as the building goes up, now this is the most important thing to note. This is the ground floor plan. If you look at the second floor plan, it looks almost the same. But when you look at the third floor plan, you can see what is really going on here. This is the difference between mainstream housing and what we're trying to do. Mainstream housing, the third floor plan would look exactly like the second floor plan. It's a cookie cutter building that maximizes the FAR. What we're trying to do in this case is, because there's no FAR, because the code says, you know, we'll give you height incentives, but it's not about making a relentless building. You sculpt the third floor and you put the third floor and raise the height only on a principal street, so that the lower massing here is only 2 stories facing the neighborhoods to the back. So how you mass a building has a lot of important things to do about how you see the context and how you respond to it. This is the section through the large courtyard. Note that you have ample ground floors through which you come into the court, townhouses on the top and loft units on the other side. And the result is a simple village-like building. This is, you know, classic revival of traditions that Southern California always has had. We've just forgotten what they are. Just bringing in complex houses together around beautiful courtyards that make for simple buildings that can be built. I mean, note that this is a 4-story building right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it doesn't look imposing because you're sculpting it. You're creating a 3-story mass, a 4-story mass, a 3-story mass, a 3-story mass, a 4-story mass at the back. So this variety of change, if shepherded and monitored, can yield pretty interesting results with the same market conditions that we operate. This is the courtyard. This is the corridor. Note how the corridor is disguised. So you do not feel like it's a corridor. It's converted into a loggia on top, and it's converted into a sit out right here. So instead of treating it like a circulation corridor, more like a motel, you actually disguise it as part of the architecture. So you can actually have a chair and look down and enjoy the courtyard. This is the second courtyard. Note the stairs going up into the units above. And this is the courtyard during the winter. There's a beautiful deciduous tree which goes all the way into the garage through a tree well, sheds its leaves, brings ample sun into the courts. Very simple architecture. There's nothing special about this, but it takes incredible care to make sure that the interface, just as you want buildings to make a public realm, you want buildings inside a courtyard to make a private realm. How the entrances to the units are, where they are, what the landscape is of the essence in projects like this. And now we come to a very interesting project that's very applicable to your downtown, because your downtown has a lot of transitional sites. Transitional sites means that there are sites that on the one hand may face Ramona or face a major street like Downing or Bogart, but on the other hand, they look at single family neighborhoods directly on the other side. How do you design a project that is a single parcel, but you actually respect the single family houses on one side and respect the downtown condition on the other? You want dense buildings in downtown, but you want single family fabric on the other side. How do you do this for one developer on one parcel? So here is a site in South Pasadena next to the train station. This is the Gold Line stop. This is Meridian. This is Mission. If any of you know South Pasadena, you can see that the site is here, which is directly related to the main street and downtown condition. And right here is the beginning of a single family neighborhood. So the developer has assembled all these parcels, and the project begins with a dense portion towards the downtown and a less dense portions towards the single family neighborhood. So how do you design a project from here to here that respects this on the one hand and this on the other? And this is the challenge. When you look at what's happening here, the buildings look like this. When you look at what's happening here, the buildings look like this. So how do you design a project here that both respects this and that? And here's what the lesson we learned here is. This is the site. You can see that the downtown is here and the single family buildings are here. Note the difference in these kind of buildings, which are the main street buildings, versus these kind of buildings, which are single family buildings. Now, the reason I'm showing you these graphics is these are the graphics we showed to the Planning Commission and the Council when we were trying to get this project approved, because we had to show them actually what we are trying to say and do. So the way we talked about it is, here is the site, and in a conventional business as usual development, this is the kind of project that you would get, which is a developer comes and basically designs one project and multiplies it 3 times relentlessly on the side within the ice box, which is the FAR envelope. So the gray ice box that you see is the maximum height limit of the project. So say it is 35 feet. So he takes the 35 feet and packs it with as much as he can get with no respect for difference between here and here. The important thing is you can take the same FAR envelope, you can take the same height envelope and design a project that is like this. Now, what is the difference between this and this? This is a project that we call cookie cutter. It basically says, I don't care if there is a single family house here, I'm going to design the same building here as there. This project says that's not what we're going to do. We're going to take the densest part of the project and put it here. We're going to put a middle density here at the back, and then all along the front of this street and this street, we're going to make duplexes and single family houses that respect what is going on around here. So if a neighbor comes out of his historic house here or here, they're not going to see a blank wall or something as relentless as this. They're actually going to see something that was always there to begin with, which is single family porches and fabric. And you can do the same thing within the same height limit, within the same FAR envelope. This is the irony of this science, that you don't have to change any of the rules. You can achieve the same densities within the zoning code, just about recalibrating how you look at the context. So this is the diagram that shows you that instead of having the same color on the entire site, you have a dense color, a less dense color, a less dense color at the back of the site, and in the front of the site, the least dense color, which addresses the single family homes. And this is the second lesson, that all it really relies on is to put the higher density at the back and create frontage conditions that are compatible with what is around you. So this is where Kaiser will be writing a very sophisticated code, because if we can respect the scale, the character, through frontage conditions that make compatible urbanism between the two sides of a street, we can pretty much do whatever we want behind it, which will not disturb what is going on here. And the result is a diverse project which has a industrial style building, which respects the existing buildings in the downtown. And the rest of the project is a craftsman style project that you see along the rest of the street. And Kaiser and I did a charrette. We did a specific plan for 2-3 years ago for South Pasadena, and the project you just saw is right here. So you can see how projects like this are now beginning to spawn other ways of thinking about the larger places. This is literally the downtown of Pasadena, not unlike yours, and begin to insert new single-family, new multifamily density to complete the vacant parcels within the downtown area. I want to end with 3 or 4 main ideas for us to talk about today in terms of architecture, just pure architecture, just simple things about architecture that transform mainstream development. The first one is pure frontage. We've talked about this, but I want to demonstrate it through another project. This is an affordable housing project in Pasadena called Fair Oaks Court, north, very close to the freeway, the 210 freeway. And it was done in a time when the neighborhood around it was not very invested in. So this was beginning to seed a new investment in the neighborhood. And it's a dense project that is actually 2 and 3 stories at the back, but along the front, it is done in a craftsman style frontage that begins to revive the neighborhood character that disappeared from that neighborhood. So the moment you now begin to craft an incredibly important and intricate street front, you can take an affordable project and really make it as beautiful as any other project can be. So the point I'm trying to make is affordability should never become an excuse for bad development. Neither in terms of the density, nor in terms of response to context, and certainly not in terms of the architecture, character, and quality, provided the city staff and the administration care about this and shepherd this through your code and through your commission hearings and so on. This is the courtyard behind this project. So you enter through here and you go into these courts where you have sort of communal courtyards with people living around them. All this is affordable housing. This is a project we just finished 2 years ago, which is very much applicable to your downtown because this is a 3-story and 4-story building. So it's a simple 3-story building. But the important lesson here, that the reason I'm showing you this, is the length of this building right here is about 150 feet. Now, if the entire project was done in one style, it would be one kind of building, which may be okay. But there may be portions and areas where you want to break the look of the building. Rather than have the entire building done in one style, you break the look of the building. Although the building is continuous on the inside, it is not continuous on the outside. So it looks like two buildings, which begins to change the scale of the street as a pedestrian walks on it. So how we determine the character of architecture, and where we determine the character of architecture, is a very simple thing that can be a conscious gesture to create different streets within your downtown. This is the courtyard of the project. This is, again, a 3-story building, which is a continuous 100-foot-long building. There are places, for example, along Ramona, along some of your main streets next to City Hall. There could be buildings like this, which are 3, maybe even 4 stories, or 3 stories in the front with 4 stories stepping back, so you never see it from the street, where you can have retail or commercial uses on the ground floor with loft buildings or townhouse units on the upper floor that are long buildings that actually create pretty significant streetscapes and fabric. So there is a place for buildings like this, there's a place for buildings like this, and finally, there is a place for buildings like this. We should not be afraid of 4- and 5-story buildings, provided they are made to behave. Note how this is a 5-story building, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what happens is you line it, instead of making it completely cookie cutter, you line it with a 3- and 4-story building in the front of it. So you put a 1 to 3-story face here, you put a 4-story face here, you project a balcony, you show a double order here. So instead of the whole thing being completely relentless, just playing with certain window rhythms, playing with massing gestures, playing with the front versus the side streets, can create buildings that dignify density in a way that can be very compatible and very responsible to the kind of streets that they sit on. So I'll leave you with this thought before we take questions. The choice of making the character and quality of our downtown is completely in our hands. How we make the public realm, how we craft the open space, how we decide the scale, the height of our buildings, and eventually the architectural character of our buildings is something that is entirely in our hands. The idea of doing this process over the next day will be with your help to figure out what it is that you would like to see in your downtown, what are the things that you want to push for, and craft the planning instruments that will enable all of us to make it happen. We'll take questions. I'll stop there. And if we want to go back to any slide, I'll just leave some of the slides on so that we can go back to it. So.
Thank you, Vinaya, for that presentation. So those of you that have any comments or questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat box or the Q&A. And also, if you would like to provide your comments, please raise your hand and we'll go ahead and let you provide your comments or questions. Okay, looks like we have Mayor Lozano.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you, Ron, and everyone that's participating in this Zoom. It's phenomenal. I really like the whole explanation and the various designs throughout Pasadena. I mean, they're a good example of what we could apply here. Secondly, just want to also share that there's a good example of very unique project that was built in Baldwin Park, which is located on Ramona, Francisquito, and I think it's, I'm not certain if it's Corac Street. I may be wrong on that, on the secondary street. However, it's, Ron, I don't know if you're familiar, it's called Via Ramona, I believe.
Yes, I actually, good point. Yes, I am aware of that site.
And that kind of falls in what Kaiser is explaining here. Yeah, with the various projects that he's presented. So that one just kind of reminds me of the way you know, different structures are flowing in and so on and so forth. But Villa Ramona is a good example. And Kaiser, thank you for the presentation. Excellent.
Mayor, it's Vinayak Bane that made the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Mayor, for those comments. I will be sure to share that site with the consultant team and staff. Looks like we have Paul Hernandez, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you again for, excuse me, for hosting this charrette this afternoon. You know, I really do appreciate the conversation in and around where, you know, how we make the density, you know, work for our community, in which, you know, you were talking about, you know, not shying away, but also being very mindful of the neighborhood, you know, the single families and so forth, instead of doing, you know, cookie cutter projects, you know, with the 3 and 4, you know, stories, and have those set back and so forth, with the lesser density in the front and the higher density in the back. You know, I see that as a great example, and also as a great opportunity to be able to, you know, offer, you know, low income, middle income, affordable housing, you know, with a loft style or single unit studios for those young professionals or individuals that are in their twilight years, where they don't necessarily need as much space, but make them available. And I certainly, you know, look forward to, you know, having the first floor be, you know, utilized with retail space and so forth. So they're, you know, so it brings people out to spend time on the blocks and the neighborhoods. And also, obviously earlier you spoke about the traffic flow and so forth. You know, I have no problem slowing down the traffic in our, you know, on Ramona and of course Main, you know, every day as those residents and folks that live around here and our visitors use Main, Baldwin Park every day at about 4:30 on to about 6 or 7:30 as a way to get home, and they're just flying, and it becomes basically a traffic nightmare. You know, if we have any traffic, it's along those areas. So looking at, you know, reducing the speeds, but also encouraging people to get out of their cars and, you know, spend some time and spend some of their money in our city as they're going through, certainly would be beneficial in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for those comments. Great comments. We haven't received any comments yet. Again, if you'd like to provide your comments, Alex, we have Councilwoman June Ayala. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Kaiser enticed me, so I did come back, Kaiser.
I'm so glad you did.
Yes, and, I used my lunch hour to come on and hear your presentation. I just want to echo what my council colleagues said, Mayor Lozano and Mayor Pro Tem Hernandez. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the options. Exactly what Mayor Lozano was talking about, Ramona Villa, an excellent example of looking like single family residence. It's a beautiful location that we have along Ramona. It's a good option. I also appreciate your attention to the different kind of ways we can address many multi-use homes, those kinds of things. And I really appreciate the presentation. So thank you. And I look forward to what will come out of all of this. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments, Jean. So we had one comment, Kaiser, if you wanted to expand on it, submitted by Steve. If transitional density is being proposed between Ramona and the single family residences to the south, perhaps a specific plan area needs to be enlarged in order to encourage medium density opportunities.
Yeah, I think we're in 100% agreement with Steve there. And I think that's one reason why we've already expanded the current specific boundaries to include those transitional parcels. One, so that the transitional parcels can take advantage of all the investments that the city and private investment that's going to come at the station. But two, whatever transitional density occurs there can actually begin to reinforce and protect the existing residential neighborhood. So all of the projects that Vinayak presented are excellent examples of transitional density. And if you can imagine those being incorporated in and around the station in the parcels that we've already expanded, I think that will begin to take advantage of the investments at the station and be appropriate land uses rather than single family residences that face the railroad tracks today and the parking areas in the front, but also begin to protect and encourage reinvestment within the existing single family residential neighborhoods.
Thank you, Kaiser. So we haven't received any additional comments.
Ron, this is Ben. I'll make a comment,
Oh, go ahead.
please. This is Ben Martinez, the city's Community Development Director. I'm really pleased with the selection of this team that is working on the revised downtown specific plan and coming into the city of Baldwin Park, having worked for several other municipalities that have done similar processes for their downtown areas. We really got a great team here, and I really appreciate they're just making their recommendations, they sort of seem easy, or that they don't require, it seems easy. It's like they're bringing us a package, but it really is a complex situation. And I just like the way they're delivering these. These are recommendations essentially, and they'll become part of a plan for us to move forward with and bring to our mayor and city council for consideration. I think it's really going to change the landscape here in Baldwin Park in the next 10 to 20 years and more. I really think we've done a few things. When you look at the Rome development next to City Hall, that project already integrated some of these principles that we're talking about today. We have some projects that are on the drawing board that are implementing these principles, these community design and planning principles. So we've done a few nice projects. Via Ramona was mentioned, that one also. So we have some good examples already. We have a few more coming. But I think I want to say that I think Baldwin Park is turning a corner now. We're just not going to accept anything less than the best. That's what our attitude should be. That's what our goals should be. We should, one day hopefully someone will do a presentation on Baldwin Park, not just Pasadena, right? They'll come to our city and take pictures and videos of things that were done in our city. Right now, yes, we got to go to Pasadena and cities like that have implemented these projects, and they're a little bit ahead of us. But we're going to play catch up, and I think one day will be the presentation for another city to gaze upon and admire. So thank you everyone for the involvement, and this is it was a great session. Thank you.
Ron, can I have a couple of minutes?
Yes.
I want to quickly build off what Ben just said, because I think this is truly a momentous occasion in Baldwin Park, and I want to plead with the council. By the way, Mayor, Council, your comments are very reassuring for us. It's very refreshing to hear you talk about the traffic, and to hear Ben talk about parking. These are challenges that we face in other cities where we have less progressive people, and we have to start with education. But it's refreshing to hear these comments from the mayor, the council people, as well as staff. I think all the stars are aligning. I want to plead with you to stick with us for another day and a half. Come back this evening, because what you have been seeing thus far, and we'll provide a quick update. So we'll bring you up to speed. It's not too late. We'll bring you up to speed. What you've been seeing thus far is two-dimensional. We've been talking about network and parcels that are in play and some open space concepts. And we're going to move into the third dimension this evening and talk about street sections and buildings. And you will see how these things that we're presenting in the noon come back and tie it all together in the evening. So please come back this evening. And then tomorrow's presentation is on mobility and parking, which are two important components that make this area click, because we want to still make sure that these important functions of moving around and making sure that as people continue to drive in the near future, that we're providing enough parking for them. And then talk about some disruptive technologies that are coming to Southern California and how we can take advantage of them. So we're talking about mobility concepts that are going to come into play, that are already in play, and that are going to come into play in the next 10, 15 years, and plan for them today so we can incorporate them in our planning process. So please come back tomorrow afternoon at noon, and then we're going to end it tomorrow at 4:30 with a final presentation. So I know it's back to back, and it's really making a demand for your time, and we really appreciate it. But your comments and your feedback is reinforcing for us and helps us move forward.
We're good, fine, thank you. Did they take the, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Kaiser. We got a couple of comments that came in. First, for Vinayak, it says, one of the interesting things about both Mission Meridian and also the Marengo apartments is that they achieve richness in the elevations with fairly minimal horizontal modulation in the building footprint and front edge of the building. If he's asking if you can go ahead and bring up those photos again.
Well, of which one?
Mission Meridian.
This is Mission Meridian, yeah.
Do you have the other words showing the residential portion?
Oh, I see, okay.
We have a little bit of lag on the screen.
Can you see it now?
No.
Can you refresh your screen, Vinayak?
Yeah, let me try again.
Oops.
And by the way, we're going to post all of these presentations online on the website, so as well as this the entire presentation on the YouTube channel. So
Can you see it now, Ron?
Yes, thank you, Vinayak. Yeah, this is the point he was making at the Mission Meridian on Marengo.
Yes, and that's a very important point, because we don't want any of you to think that achieving what we've achieved here, if you like it, is some kind of rocket science that is very difficult. It's actually not. I mean, the beautiful streetscapes I showed you in the beginning that Dave did, and this the buildings that come through. If you guys like what you see, then please know that these are very simple things to achieve. We're not telling developers to complicate anything. These are all stacked. The efficiency of these units is 100% as good as any of the mainstream apartment projects. All that you do is you care a little bit about the elevations. You look at great examples that you like, and you learn from them. That's about it.
Hold on one second.
Vinayak, there's another comment from Dirk Tellen.
It says parkways in the middle of boulevards are great for events, however, may not be used daily when removed from pedestrian paths and retail uses. 3rd Street in Santa Monica is a good example of integrating streets.
Right, right, and the the issue with the median on Ramona is that, you know, it already exists and it has curbs already. So it's a landscape median right now and it's raised. So what we're trying to do there is we're probably just going to leave it with a beautiful landscape, which will help create a visual center for your street. But the advantage of having medians such as the ones we did in Lancaster, not that Lancaster is a solution for every street, is that in the case of Lancaster, because we couldn't break the sidewalks, the only way to narrow the street was to come up with something in the middle. But I think Dave should address some of these questions as well. Dave, you have some thoughts on this as well.
Well, the beauty of Lancaster was by putting the trees down the center of the street, it really, obviously it's a very harsh environment. So one, we were able to provide shade for most of the street that never had shade once before. And the other thing, if you know Lancaster, there's very strong winds that come through the community at many times. And by having that tree cover there also helped in that fact. A lot of it came from the original design, came from the fact of programming, how the city actually used the space on a regular basis. And we found that the parades, various different options that they were using within the city at that time kind of really dictated the fact that they would really like a center for people to stand in when they use the street. And so building in this flexibility in the street where the central portion of the street now could actually be used and have functions, or even have the street still be used. So there is lots of flexibility within the design, and that's the beauty of the downtown, because downtowns don't stay stagnant, they change and uses change, and having that ability to change with it is really important in the urban realm.
Good point, David. I just wanted to put in a reminder, and I've shared this with the consultant team. And Vinayak, I'm not sure if you got a chance to hear this. Is when I first joined the city, I found out, you know, that Baldwin Park has one of the most robust, and this was done in the presentation, a really popular summer concert series, and it draws people regionally. And when I heard the number total of people that come to the event during the summer program, was 13,000 people visit the downtown, and they'll close off, and if Manny or Helen want to chime in a little bit. But during that time, some of the pictures that you showed from Lancaster kind of show what we have during the summer here in our downtown on Main Street when we close that off. But to see Ramona in a different light, it's amazing what can be done. So we have one more comment. So Helen says there's also a 15K marathon that's also programmed within the downtown. Thank you, Helen. All right, perfect. So we haven't received any more comments, so we'll do a last call before we end our noon talk. For anybody that wants to submit any last comments or questions, please let us know, raise your hand. All right. Again, as Kaiser mentioned, and the consultant team staff, please join us again this evening at 6 p.m. for our charrette. We look forward to having you. And again, tomorrow we'll have another noon talk and also conclude with our charrette at 4:30. But thank you all for joining us. Great comments, great feedback, and we'll see you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.